real problem, you know, because I would go to Washington and fix a bunch of things. I have all these ideas. Oh, hey, I got something else I would do. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so you talked about competition, but if there is competition among credit suppliers, it seems that they would compete on clarity of the agreement. In fact, there is evidence that this occurs. Please comment.
Well, I'd like to know what the evidence is. I can't comment on it because I haven't seen it. In fact, I'll tell you a story.
Allied Bank.
I'm sorry?
Allied Bank.
Allied Bank.
I'll tell you the story around this, and that's the story of a major credit card issuer who announced back during the debate, some of you may remember a couple of years ago, a thing passed called the Card Act. While the Card Act was being debated, it was about credit card practices. One of the credit card practices that was just being hammered on was universal default. And so the idea behind universal default is you make your payments to your credit card company, but you get into a dispute or you have a financial problem and you don't pay some other creditor. Your credit card company then raises your interest rate from the 7.9 you were promised under the contract to 29.9, default rate of interest. And so people were coming in and they were testifying, they're just raising Cain about it. So a major credit card issuer stands up and says, we hereby renounce universal default. Hot dog, right? And I want to point out, they got a lot of what's called earned media, the best kind of media. Folks stood up with them from Congress and said, whoa, market works, markets heals itself, markets repair. Except that about 6 months later, some hapless vice president gets pushed out very quietly in front of the cameras to say, we're going to start doing universal default again. And here's what was interesting. Not that they changed positions, companies' plans, but here was the explanation. I'm just paraphrasing slightly. The credit card agreements are so complicated that when we dropped universal default, nobody could tell. So we didn't get any additional customers out of it. So as a result, all we're doing is just giving up revenues and not getting anything in return. The classic description of a non-competitive market, a market that's not working. So we really don't see any choice except to go back to a world in which we use universal default just like everyone else. And that's what the company did, and then Congress turned around and outlawed it because they figured that was the only way to get rid of the practice. It's very hard, credibly, to come forward as the clean guys in a world in which the products are so complicated that consumers can't see them.
Okay, I think here's a question you might know a little about. We'll see whether you want to answer it. What is being done to regulate mortgage foreclosures?
Well, so here's where the state of law stands on that, and that is mortgage foreclosures. I actually teach about mortgage foreclosures when I'm really in my real life, about mortgage foreclosures and about Article 9 of the Uniform Commercial Code, where you take back non-real property, chattels, real stuff. Anyway, the short version is mortgage foreclosures are largely governed by state law. There are then some federal law issue overlays. The current state of play is that there were many people around the country back in 07, 08, who were saying as mortgage foreclosures began to accelerate, there's a problem. Some of the servicers, the people who are actually servicing these mortgages, when they were foreclosing, going through the foreclosure process, are not following all the rules. That finally broke as a big story and kind of caught fire last October, I think, is the case. And both the federal banking regulators and the state attorneys general opened investigations. The Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, which is the chief federal banking regulator, has recently announced that they are reaching an accord with the banks. But right now it's an ongoing law enforcement matter with the state attorneys general and some of the other banking regulators. So it's a problem that's in mid-play at this moment.
Okay, we got one, we'll go with one last question here.
Okay.
What does your agency do for low-income and low-asset families, those who can't afford a mortgage or a checking account?
I'm going to make a pitch here that what this agency is about making oh, did I step on my ear? Yeah. Is about making markets work. And that is the single best thing you can do for low and moderate income families, is to make prices clear up front, it's to make risks clear up front, it's to make products easy to compare from one to another. I think that one of the most profoundly disturbing parts of the most recent mortgage scandal, and I don't know any other way to describe what's happened in subprime mortgages and other mortgages, or that the number of people who were drawn in thinking they were getting one kind of product and who ended up with something very different, thinking they were getting the best product for themselves. The data I've seen, and I don't know if there are better data, I don't get to read the data as often now as I used to, but that somewhere between 50 and 60% of those who ended up with high-cost subprime mortgages would have qualified for lower-priced mortgages if only they had known that those were available to them. So I'm a big believer that you try to make these markets work, you make prices clear, you make risks clear, you make it easy to compare one product with another. And that's good for middle-class families, it's good for working-class families, it's good for families at the margins. It's what makes markets competitive. And ultimately, I really want to make this big, it's what makes everybody in this country safer. Because it's when people can say with confidence, yeah, I looked at that thing. There are some people who get this wrong, but at least the information was there, and I figured out I can afford this thing, and I'm willing to go forward. And who can shop so that these markets are working more competitively. That in general, we don't provide the raw materials that feed into a system that we have now learned will aggregate those risks and magnify those risks and spin it out in a way that runs the risk of bringing our entire country to its knees financially. So I think at the end of the day, we all, whatever our economic circumstances, have a real interest in seeing the success of a Consumer Financial Protection Bureau that's just oriented toward making those markets work and saying, you know, there'll always be people in this world who want to separate folks from their money. I mean, it has been thus throughout our history and the histories that precede us. But in these basic areas about buying homes, taking out credit, taking out student loans, those should be areas where it's pretty clear what's going on pricing, on risks, and on comparisons. And that ultimately, we're all going to be better off if that's the case. At least I believe that.